Oh, thank you.
There we go. Before we start business, for the recording purposes, you missed the pledge. That's there. So Bob, did you want host? Sure. All right, there we go. So that's over to Bob. Now let me see if I can share here. It's just in a Word format. We can see that yet. Okay.
I see Jackie.
So here we have, Dan, do you see is there a gray box in the way, like right here?
Nope, it's all good.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you. So in the minimum of operations, the 1 month I have this put up there is just a number. At the last board meeting, we chatted a little bit about, if we were going fully remote, what would a time frame look like where we might want to institute something of a layoff or a furlough or do nothing to there. I just put down 1 month. It's not an arbitrary number, but it's a fair number for some consideration. In there, we've got each facet of operations we need to worry about. The operationally is transportation, cafeteria, the buildings and grounds, and then the academic side with the elementary, the high school, and then kind of the business offices piece that goes into play. So I'll just run through each one. These are not in any order of importance, and there's nothing here that is in stone. This is, if we were just to go to basic minimum operations, this is not talking about impacting instructional program. It's just operationally, how would we think we need to look? So transportation, what would it mean to be minimal? No regular bus runs, whether that's the morning, the afternoon, or anything that would be for any after school. There would not be any meal deliveries outside of what we're required to deliver for any quarantine families. That would include CSE placements for transportation to those, and it would include transportation to CTE programs. Our CSE placements are daily. That's 5 days a week. Our CTE programs run on an every other day model. We're on day 1, and it's a straight roll. So this week there'll be 3 days. Next week there'll be 5. There'll be 2, and they do 3, 2 as it moves along. And then that changes based on what happens in the week. So like last week, it was Thanksgiving. It was day 1 on Monday, day 2 on Tuesday, and then there was no school for 3 days. So day 1 came back on Monday again.
Okay, so they don't change it.
Right, they just continue the every other day. So if there's a snow day in the middle, whatever that snow day was supposed to be will carry over to the next day.
Gotcha.
And it'll carry from there. If my 8 drivers is correct, I think it is. I might be off by 1. In talking with Mr. Wilbur, we're going to need 5 drivers to accomplish this, which would impact 3 drivers overall. For mechanic and supervision, there won't be any changes there. We still have DOT inspections we're going to have to worry about. We still have bus keep we have to worry about. We still have state paperwork and all those pieces, and the management of that area still to happen. So for transportation-wise, that is where we think we would stand. Cafeteria, this is probably the least stable of all those, because the cafeteria will depend a lot on what is required of us to do for feeding and how that piece works. Back in March, we were required to maintain a feeding program. We were in from there. And the methodology we chose last time was basically you follow in the bus routes. It was the most, consumer friendly for our families and our community. It was also the most people intensive approach. Going to a much more minimalist approach would be for weekly pickups only. So the cafeteria would prepare meals for a pickup once a week. That meal would be for those meals would be for 7 days. So breakfast and lunch for 7 days for however many kids in that household would go into place. Again, no meal deliveries outside of deliveries for quarantine families for those folks. And talking with Wendy a bit, depending on what that interest level was, I think she'd need 3 people to do that, which would leave 2 workers affected. There might be a day of the week piece here too. So, if it looks like, and a lot of that would depend on the number of people who are looking for meals. If 200 students were looking for meals, that's going to require more than if we have 25, for example. We talked a little bit about putting the survey out or putting out an interest form out, so we had some of that information to kind of gauge that a little bit. If kind of our experience informs us any, if we go out to the families, we're going to have more, which would require more people here to do more work and so on. We don't get as much interest in with pickup model. It's there. And then here again, we still have state reports to complete. We still have ordering to do. We still have all that management in there, so supervision impact would remain. Buildings and grounds. This might be a touch much, but maybe by a person. We'd basically take we would take our work and we would condense it. So rather than have a day shift and a night shift, we would just go back to day shift again like we did back in the spring. With that, and we would limit staff to some basic operation and maintenance. So basic snow removal, when snow removal time is on, because we would still plan on having faculty here and then the offices would still be here. Basic cleaning, keeping rooms and offices basically clean, be kept up, and then basic maintenance and support for.
Well, what kind of sanitizing do they have to do if teachers are still in the building?
We would still need to do some, but it wouldn't be as frequent. Whereas now we have to do like Tuesday night because we switch kids over, and then either Thursday or Friday we have to do it again after the kids go. When we just have our own faculty staff, we probably would resort to once a week. And whether that would be Thursday or Friday, but we would pick a day and say, this is the day.
So everybody would have a dedicated workspace?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be cross,
Yeah.
into
Still
others.
sharing bathrooms though.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That would have
Well, the bathrooms we could still go through and clean. The numbers would be much less than what we would do because faculty tends to use those faculty bathrooms. There
We
might
don't have
be.
any shared instructional space.
Sorry?
We wouldn't have any need, there wouldn't be any crossover at all.
Well, I'm sure there's teachers that share rooms, so yeah.
If there's
they'd have a dedicated spot on the side of the room or whatever.
that's we have teachers, particularly at the high school level, they do share classrooms currently. But the big piece is if a teacher's going to teach remotely, they're going to teach from their spot, or they're going to teach from their desk, or they're going to teach from their classroom. We don't have the number of kids coming through. And so it's even if we end up having a couple teachers teaching in different spots, that still is a lot less than
Oh, absolutely.
than
Just clarifying. I agree.
yeah. And that plan would have to be worked through to go, which is why this might be a little light or a little heavy in there. So in looking at staff, shows staff being in half, 2 custodians, 2 cleaners. There is some shuffling here that goes on because of seniority rights. That's why if you look at our custodians and cleaners impacted versus those that we think we would need, it shows 1 more person than we have. And that's based on bonding rights. So 1 person gets impacted twice in that mix to there. But there again, that might be, we might decide we need another cleaner. So we need to keep 3 cleaners on rather than 2. We might decide we need to have an additional custodian on, just for feel. Building project may say, maybe we want someone to be here a little later rather than earlier, and for the impact there. That is all operational. for kind of the ins and the outs of it. And probably outside, other than the aid picture, which we'll get here into the classrooms, is where the bulk of the impact is going to go. When we get into the elementary and the secondary levels, we're really talking about all the kids remote, but we're not talking about impacting any academic programs. We would need to, so at the elementary school, all of those programs would be run by the teachers. We would need one aide for one of the bus runs because there's a monitor involved, and we approximate that to be about 20 hours a week for one aide. But the rest of those aides, we don't need lunch supervision, we don't need help getting meals to places, we don't need recess supervision and all those pieces. That would impact probably 14 people. Does that mean that we decide that we want to have an aide come in and help a day a week or 2 days a week with a self-contained classroom with remote information or something along those lines? We may want to do that, but that's kind of the next part of the conversation. High school, same thing. Students all remote, no impact on academic programs. We wouldn't do anything extracurricular athletic at a minimal level, right? Because if we're talking minimums, all the teachers would be in place. There's four aides that would be impacted. If it's shorter, we would see that being fewer people that's in place, because there would be spots where we would need help, for getting materials in and out. And the same would apply to the elementary. District offices, business, CSE, my office, all those would remain the same. My office is making sure everything's running, and the SED work, and DOA to work in coordination with the other agencies out there. Looking at the business office, bills still paid, payroll still earned, unemployment pieces are still an issue. Building contract work still needs to commence and move forward. There in CSE, we're approaching annual review season, and those would still need to continue. So that would not be impacted either. So there's kind of a very scant, skeletal. If we're going to minimums, what would the minimums look like? There. Some of the, we don't have numbers for all these yet. John said tomorrow we can start looking at that tomorrow.
What is our, so if we were to, furlough, unemploy, whatever, what is our portion of unemployment? Would we have to pay more on unemployment? I guess I would want to know what that number is too.
Yep, and I need to talk to John about what that unemployment number is, because you're correct in that whether it's a furlough or an unemployment, that there is an unemployment cost that comes to us. We do have a reserve for that.
One of the things that when I asked that question, typically, and this is typical, it's not specific to an individual, but approximately half of the salary, and we are responsible for half of that amount.
Okay. So half of the salary?
That's approximately
Okay.
per individual. And there's a 2-week lag. So I believe that I asked if it was cumulative or consecutive, because we had talked about the 1 week and what to do with that. And my understanding is that it could be cumulative. Once you start something, you can keep it open and you can keep it updated, but you wouldn't be eligible for any unemployment benefits until you had passed the 2-week
14 days.
threshold. So it would seem that the 2 weeks is significant for.
So we'd have to be closed at least 2 weeks for that to make sense.
For it to have
To
any.
even kick in, right? It'd
Yeah,
have to be
right.
more than 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks,
Right. So a 1 week period is not really.
or even 2, right? Because they
Right.
need to go 2 weeks before they're
Before they can
eligible.
file, before
Yeah.
they can
Right, and then-
activate.
So really,
So if we
the
come back
one,
after 2
1
weeks,
month, the
fine.
1 month time frame really isn't a bad number to go by.
No, I think, it'd be pretty reasonable to take a look at using that as a marker. Dr. Glover?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fine. You go ahead.
Are you going to make that available to us?
So that yes. I'll make it both, and I'll get it published here on the agenda, so community can get to it, and I'll make sure you get a copy.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, one of the things in the plan, the closure due to COVID-19, when you were talking on this particular document in remote, one of the things that was on the table was to have the special education in self-contained classes continue to meet here. Is that something that would still be part of the plan?
In the minimalist piece that I just shared with you, that's no.
No?
If we wanted that to be, I'm trying to just provide a basement, and then tell me what we want to keep. I think there's a lot of good reason to keep those classes here and going.
Sure.
But that would be something we would want to look at.
Well, one of the things that I know that I'm sort of interested in looking at and finding out is I don't think that we're ready to pull the trigger on going full remote. But if we have to, and it is, they say, you know, say we have a period of time where they say, you know, you have to be remote for the next 3 or 4 weeks. You know, I think we need to be ready for that. At this particular point in time, I think for me, it seems to be diminished returns if we start cutting things now. So I would like to know what we should be doing if, on the face of it, we get to Christmas and the Department of Health says, you know, don't come back until after February vacation. So those are the things, you know, does that mean that there would be no, I mean, the building isn't set, the teachers could still be in here, right?
Mhm.
But
Right.
would you not be able to have those special ed classes in that situation?
There is, if we are unilaterally deciding, or even if the Department of Health, well, the Department of Health, I think that changes it a little bit. If the Department of Health says you're closed, or the state says you're closed, unless they give us an out, like say unless you come back and you're testing 20% of your students, like we would in a yellow zone, then once they're out, because that's a state agency telling us that we have to close.
That's even self-contained classrooms.
Yeah, that's everybody. If it's us, you know, let's say, you know, we just went through Thanksgiving and we have a concern, like they did up in Franklin County, about keeping up with contact tracing and concern for, you know, spread here in the school and otherwise, and said, you know what, we'll see everyone in January. Then we could say, except for the self-contained classroom. And we can maintain those.
So if we make the
classes.
decision, we can decide who's here and who's
Yes.
not, but if the state or the health department says no, we
So
have
that
to.
changes that.
Okay.
Speaking of testing, are we seeking permission for testing in the situation that we might need to find ourselves if we are in a yellow?
Yep, we have been in full-blown conversations with the local Department of Health.
No, I'm talking parents. Are we seeking permissions from parents for testing? I mean,
Not yet for us to do the testing because we don't have the legal authority yet to do it.
right, you know, that's why you need permission.
Well,
To have
not-
term.
but even for us to administer the test, there's medical training and we have to, there's the, okay, then you're asking me something.
No,
that
we
we're
need
not-
permission to test. I mean, before you even go there, we need permission from parents
Right.
to test kids. So we need to seek parental permission for any kind of testing.
Right,
So before we even, so what I'm saying is, are we seeking that now so that we're not in a crunch if we come up against the situation where the Department of Health says you need to have the first 20% of your population?
and yes, but we're not to the point where we're ready to send forms out.
Well, I think, you know, that's
yeah.
just something we need to be,
Oh, yeah, because that's part of the conversation we've been having is, not only are we required to, but we have to have consent for, and then what do you do if we don't have non-consenting? And-
right. I mean, those are all issues
Yeah.
that would be easier taken care of, not in the heat of.
So what's 20% of our population? Is it 20% of the population that's not remote, like population that's in the building, or?
It is 20% of the population of folks who are here.
So the remote students, they're remote all the time, wouldn't be counted?
Right, remote
Just
students
these
who are not
students.
here unless they participate in person in an extracurricular or an athletic.
Gotcha, so then they would count.
Then they would be
20%.
required. Other than that, if someone's just full remoted at home, they wouldn't be required to.
So what's our 20% number, do you know?
Oh, at our elementary number, that 20% and I think it's over the 2-week piece, it's gonna be about 60 kids. It's a little less at the high school. And it's
Isn't it
randomized.
Isn't it
Go ahead.
20% of your faculty, staff, like everybody, not 20% of the students?
Yeah, and the number I just gave Jackie is students. So when you look at faculty, you're looking at 16. When you're looking at the other support staff folks, you're
But I
looking
think
at 12 ish.
So I think what Jackie was saying, that it's like all those groups together, it's not separate groups.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be 20% of the
Right.
elementary, 20% of
You're right.
staff, 20%. So it would be an
That's right.
overall number of what everybody.
We take the, and I'm rough cutting it here. We're taking about the 550 students, we're taking about, what it works out to be, the 40, 45 teachers, we're taking in about the same number for aides and everybody. We're taking all those numbers together, and then 20% of that number gets tested.
Gotcha.
Based on who is here, and that's randomized. Until we get to that last 20%, then this is the group that's there. There is some leeway conversations going on, because before the testing was strictly about the PCR testing. You know, that's the nose swab one and up and it goes away and then comes back. Some places with this rolling 20%, they've been accepting the antigen testing, which is much less invasive. Training is different, a lot less expensive. But we're not sure that's part of the conversation.
Do we
too.
have to cover the expense for that, or is the state covering?
Well, that's another part of the conversation. I think some of that answer is yes. In part that we cover some of those costs and there'll be a state reimbursement to it maybe. Gotta say maybe nowadays there. But for example, they talk about Brexis cards. I don't know if you've heard of them. Basically, they're a testing card and they have a blue line on them and you get them saturated, and then after a certain amount of time, if the blue line shows up, you're positive. Those, the state has them by the thousands, and those I think you get for free from the state. Anything else that gets more serious incurs more of a cost.
Do they count those as an actual?
That's out west, like in the western part of the state, there are places who are accepting that for the 20% testing. But when we've been sending students or families, or they've been going, it's been the PCR test, that's been our standard.
So,
So keeping school open could get expensive too, depending on testing.
Yeah. And then it's, where do the reimbursements come, if they come?
we're closing it to,
Oh, no, I know, I'm just saying, like, there's the pros and cons to either one.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's only if we're in the yellow.
School, trust me. What was
That's
that?
only if we're in the yellow, right?
Oh, if we get to a yellow,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
that's basically yellow, yes.
So you have some roughing out to
Yeah.
do, finishing
Yeah.
those numbers, what that would look like. What are people's thoughts about whether it's in response to an increase in the numbers or the health department, or do you think that we would ever want to come up to that conversation about, say individually, does the school district make that decision about continuing?
I think it also depends on too what the impact here in the building is. I mean, is it teachers, is it staff, you know, like, I guess it depends on whether we have healthy people to keep the building open and can continue. I mean, knock on wood, we've been very lucky so far.
We actually just had a bit of that conversation today of, you know, what number of teachers does it get to where we can't cover anymore?
Mhm.
You know, in part from our closure back, it seems like forever ago now, just a few weeks back, part of that is we lost 7 teachers. And so we weren't going to be able to, to cover for 7 teachers because we don't have the substitutes to cover, to be able to make that happen. So we're having a bit of that conversation of, and we don't have a solid number yet either. It's where do we get to the spot where we aren't going to have enough people to, between potential COVID concerns, between just being sick, between, just regular life, and then where does it go? So, still conversations we're having.
So minimum threshold, anybody have any thoughts about for the time before we trip, any plan for changing of staffing?
The only number I have comes back from N1H1. And that is, back we didn't have all this going on. So it was basically up to each individual district. And we kind of collectively decided if we approached 25%, whether that was of student body or of, of faculty, that then we would start considering closing, basically, at that point. Because there
Talking
was
about a prevalence here of, I guess I misunderstood the question.
Well,
So you're talking about 25%, the 25% number represents
the
what?
number of students. So
Number of students who are
absent.
absent, okay.
It just, but that, I can tell you that was a gut feel number. There was nothing hard behind it. That was just a, when did we feel like either we couldn't staff or we had a sufficient absenteeism in the student body that would allow us to move forward.
and that's a reality.
Mhm.
But it's not something that we would say, you would do that on a day-by-day or a short-term basis. But what my question is what threshold do you feel that we need to reach in order to impact staffing numbers if we were to talk about reducing staff for the period of time of closure? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
That's right.
You know,
Okay.
How long do
what's
we-
our threshold for, before we, so those are questions that, I think I need to ponder, and
Okay.
I do think that one of the things that we need to look at, is the cost. But we also have the issue of our unassigned fund balance too. So I think that also impacts part of this conversation.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we want to just have this information, make sure that it reappears in a more finished form at our next board meeting
Yep.
for discussion for plan. So does anybody have any other questions or concerns for Dr. Glover to consider as he puts that plan together?
I guess I have a couple clarifying questions. So one is, so we're talking about a few different things here, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about voluntary versus mandated closure.
Right,
And then we're also talking about short-term versus long-term.
right.
And short or long-term could be voluntary or mandated.
Mhm.
And
I guess we would need to define too what short-term is and what's long-term. Like, is
Right, so I would
short-term
say-
less than a month?
and I don't know exactly what that line is. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
a day to a week is short-term, a month or longer is long-term, 3 weeks, I don't know where it falls, but
Yeah, I don't know either.
But, so I guess just thinking through, right, because I mean, the short-term closure doesn't really involve us. And really the only thing that involves us is voluntary long-term closure probably, right? And does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following. Yeah.
And so, right, because that was really what we wanted to know, that so we can with the rest of the information, answer the question that came up, right? Was what is the, what are our options?
Mhm.
Good. Just want to make sure we're all thinking similarly.
So I think we're headed in the right direction as far as getting the information that we would need. I do think it is important to focus on what we need rather than the cost, because I think at this particular point, we have to make sure that we can maintain as much as possible for the students and the staff, but we need to also, be responsible too. So I do think that, going to either a furlough or a layoff, this is a pretty significant step. I think we need to be more than just a couple of weeks before we take that particular step. But if it is going to be a longer period of time, I think it's something that we really have to let people know to be prepared.
Well, that's why I think if we
100%.
define the long-term and the
Right,
short
so we
term
need
to
to
make
know.
those two plans.
For us,
Yes,
is it
agreed.
3 weeks and it flips the switch to have all of these steps be reduced, or is it 4 weeks? What is it that we feel is
Right.
that
I feel
long
like if you
term?
get to the point where you're over a month, I feel like that's long-term.
Right, for me, that I'm in that
That's
step.
definitely, like, I feel like if it's under a month, then you're kind of in the short term, we can limp through kind of phase.
So I,
So, no, I think
Yeah.
that sounds about right, from my perspective. Now, just jumping back for a second to, when we're looking at costs we would incur if people were to, so if we laid people off, right?
yeah.
So for, let's say for every $1,000 of payroll, right, so.
We have to pay 5, right?
And does that start on week 1 or does that not start on week 3?
I'm not sure exactly how that works. That was just a general question as far as what cost would we incur. I asked, what cost would we, as a district, incur if we had laid, and for the purposes of unemployment insurance, a layoff and a furlough are,
The same.
they're the same thing,
Yeah.
they're synonymous. In that, after 2 weeks, then there's a lag. So I think it does cover those 2 weeks.
You
But-
get it retro back,
Yeah,
but
so
you
it's-
don't get paid the money for 2 weeks.
Right.
And sometimes it's longer than that, depending on how backed up.
They are,
So in that week 3, so say we close for 3 weeks, somebody applies after 2, and they will be able to collect for.
Well, I
week 1, 2,
think
and
you can
3.
apply right away, you just don't get anything until after that 14-day mark.
Right.
I think.
yeah, I think the earlier, and you can leave it open too, because it doesn't need to be consecutive. Because one of the things that can happen is that you can have rolling furloughs.
Yes.
So instead, if it's going to be a month, maybe somebody comes, we rotate a week. People, maybe have
One
3
group
weeks
comes
off,
in
but
1 week, one group
off.
comes in the next, to
And-
kind of rotate people, so they're here and not here.
Yeah, so you can, I'm not sure, and I don't know how that works with seniority, but I mean, that is an option for businesses. I don't know if we follow that, because contractually, we may not have that ability to do that. But there can be an option for, say, out of a 4-week period, you come in for 1 out of those 4 weeks. You just tell, the Department of Labor that you work those days.
You work that week, yeah.
But you still keep your case open.
But I do
So
think,
you need accumulation of at least 2 weeks, we think, to trip.
yes.
Before any money would come.
But I also think there is, the furlough for us, for our purposes, is we are planning on bringing them back.
Right.
So I think we just need to make sure we use that language, because we want people to come back. We don't want them to be laid off and think they're never coming back.
And that is the intent of the furlough, is that there will be a job for you when we get to the other
Yes.
side. But at this point,
So when we say 2 weeks, we mean 10 work days? We think.
yes. 2 work weeks, yeah.
You're probably, yeah.
And so you have to go over that, you have to
Yeah.
get to 11 before. So really, worst case scenario for employees would be they get filled for 10 days, right?
Right.
Which we talked about that not doing, because, but you also don't start the clock running, right? So.
But that's not clear. I mean, I don't have all
we
the
think.
ins and outs,
Okay,
but
that, at least just to.
some of it came from different places, some of it came from my own daughter's experience as far as, getting into the system, so. But I do, so I think that we have the basis, I mean, you have your plan here,
Mhm.
and, you did break it down as to what we would see in the remote. That's why I asked you about the special education, because you do have them
Right.
here. And so if it were voluntary, we could, and if it were involuntary, so does that
We
mean?
assume unless, I mean, I would assume there would be a chance that even involuntary, they might tell you to do
Right, they
something,
could
or you
still
couldn't
do that,
something, right? You may
right?
have some leeway
Right,
in it.
so would that
Theoretical
also,
involuntary.
if it were involuntary, if we came in and the state or the Department of Health said, you need to close for 4 weeks, would that affect the CTE and the programs,
Their programs would have to be shut down, right? Is that how?
would that,
Generally, when we've had programs that close, we don't send students to those programs. So when we were closed for the week,
you sent them?
we sent our younger students to their placements, but we held on to our older student just out of precaution. And then once the quarantine day was over, which was the Thursday, that Friday that student had a CT program and we sent that student. So it depends a lot on if we're told what we're told we have to
Contact
do,
tracing, yeah.
Right.
and then from there.
My question comes from the experience in that we were told that we had to close, it was New York State, and they said, you know, everybody, so it was, so that would mean, I don't think, we would not be in a different zone than anybody
Right, if
that we
the
send our kids to, right?
if the governor came out and said, everyone in these zip codes are closed, like we're all in red zone, we looked at the new map, and all of Washington County and all of our BOCES region was in red, we would not be sending anybody.
Nobody goes anywhere.
Right.
Okay, so that it depends upon.
Right. Because the approach from the spring was about regions. And now they've changed it to kind of much more specific zip coding, and then there's the 3 tiered zone, so it's a little different in its approach.
Well, the farther we go into it, the more they know about it, so it's good to see that it's evolving, because their information is evolving, so.
And it helps detach us from Albany, and that was some of the frustration last year, is that things were happening in Albany and not up here. And so, well, we would be stuck because we were part of that Albany region, the capital district, so, which will be good, but and then it's just figuring out the new approach.
So, all right, so we can take a look at those numbers. I don't mean fiscal numbers, I mean staffing numbers.
Yep.
For our next board meeting. Yeah. And this was helpful to think about, you know, what you were doing, so I don't know if you wanna just add
Yeah,
the extra.
yeah, to that, that is just kind of, it says draft on it on purpose, just because it was kind of first thought of where we're here, how do we get to each one of those next places that goes? So you can kind of follow the bouncing ball. We're in hybrid. So if we're in hybrid, we're gonna need to move up to be fully in person. How are we gonna do that? If I remember correctly, we're talking about a gradual approach, basically, to it. It's not gonna happen all at once. It'll put it in and up over some period of time, and we'll ease our way back into an in-person modality. Going back the other direction, it's much more abrupt, especially as it's mandated to, but just information to look at. We still do have to figure out details on that piece yet. But it's just our first blush of hopeful about going back to in person at some point, and then when we have to go remote, what that might look like.
I can't believe how loud the rain is in this room.
I like it when they're at nighttime, so. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Jackie, Dan, do you have any questions?
Nope. Good.
Nope, I'm good. Thanks.
So we will make sure that this is on the agenda for the December meeting, and at that point, what action would be necessary if we had a plan and it involved going a certain length of time before we would furlough, if we met that threshold, what action would be required in order to follow that through?
I think at the point is I just need we talked a little bit about here. So when we hit a month, or when we know we're going to be closed for a month, this is what we're going to do.
No, I'm just saying, I believe that it needs to be by board authority, so that's why I'm asking, do we need to do it as a resolution, or?
Yeah, either resolution or,
adopt a plan,
Yeah.
what would be the action that we should take?
I think probably by plan would be cleaner,
Okay,
because that would put, here is the,
Here's what our plan is.
now here's kind of the short-term look and the intent. Here's the long-term is defined as, and the intent. The only piece that I don't know if we can have a good solution to is what happens with the rolling. So we start short-term, okay, it's going to be 1 week, and then 1 week turns to 2, turns to 3, and then,
well, we say that, if it's cumulative
Yeah.
past 4, then whatever that threshold is, then that triggers it,
okay.
at least for me. that would be, we said, you gave us a month, and that's just an arbitrary number.
Yep.
I'm just saying a month as an example. If it was a rolling amount and we got to that month, if they weren't telling us that we were going to come back, that would say that it would be time to implement whatever plan
Yep.
we had put into place, but that would just be me. But it can be incorporated into the plan, whether it's consecutive, cumulative, or, you know, how to do it. Thoughts, Bob?
You're saying
Think of that?
consecutive and cumulative?
Well, or the rolling part, I mean, we either get it in a big chunk and say we're out a certain length of time, or it could be consecutive, 2 weeks to another
Right,
week.
right.
you know,
Like if you
so-
kept rolling into
Rolling.
4 weeks, that 4-week mark
Once
is
you
when you have to.
cumulatively reached a number,
As one consecutive chunk.
right,
Yes.
Got it.
then, for me, that would be,
I just wanted.
right, so, sorry,
was just
I said
thinking
that sort of
Well,
backwards.
we were including the
Yeah.
ones that have
Yeah.
already happened. as-
Right,
as
but
part
from
of
a
that
certain, you know, from
cumulative.
your first, not, not, we wouldn't count what happened, right, from this, they'd have to be consecutive, right? Is that what you're saying, is that what you're asking?
Well, I
We
was,
wouldn't go back and, we wouldn't count the
Exactly.
ones that we had already had because of the COVID exposure that we had.
Because we didn't have it in place.
Right.
Once
There
we
was
put
no
this
plan.
plan in place, then we would use the plan.
right, I'm just thinking about so, once we get to that month,
Mhm.
then, Greg, so we could get to that month in a couple different chunks? Or is just as one contiguous chunk?
I would say one continuous chunk, because those smaller pieces is a break.
Right.
Sort of like a break in service, so if we were to reach, yeah.
There's a lot of.
For me, it would
There's
be
not
to
too
see
many
a consecutive,
consecutive.
no, I see what you're saying, is that if we had 2 weeks and then came back for 2 weeks and had another 2 weeks, do we reach the 4? For me, no, we would just have the 2, because
So when
for
we're
me,
back in school for like more than a week, then that would reset the
For me,
clock ticker.
as soon as we came to school, it would reset the timer,
Okay.
at least for me, I mean, if I
Yeah,
were,
no, I think, but that, we need to be clear, I think that's.
but I mean, that's.
So then
something
that
to
triggers,
consider.
sorry, so
Right.
that triggers, then we get to the cumulative month,
Mhm.
the consecutive month, and that triggers
Whatever the plan,
whatever the plan is, okay. I'm just, just thinking about, trying to think about it strategically from the employee's perspective.
right,
And, right, because we're not gonna know we're to the month, within a month, and then we've lost the opportunity to.
And well, unless we're told, we're gonna
Absolutely,
be
but it's different,
closed the
right?
month of December, the month of January, we're coming back in February,
That's a lot easier.
then that's a lot easier to
Yeah,
deal with.
absolutely.
It's just this, if you
If you
we
get
have
to week,
cases and things.
if you get to week 2 and they say it's gonna be another 2 weeks, I think that too is easy, because then you're gonna hit your month and then you know
Because we know ahead of time.
that's
The
there.
not knowing is gonna be the tricky part.
right.
If they,
Nobody left us a roadmap for this one, so.
I suspect it'd be more likely to not necessarily know, right? That,
Right, oh, I think
that it
it's
would
more
get-
of a rolling thing, yeah.
Right, and then thinking about, okay, because at some point you want to get to those 11 days, right? I mean, you want to not leave your employees at 10 days, right? Because you go to a month and then, okay, that's it. And then they say, okay, you can come back in 2 weeks, right? So people get furloughed, they end up getting furloughed for 2 weeks, even though you've been out for 6. And you're, so
But
really,
we would have been.
But
we
we're
would have been
paying them
for
for
six.
those 4 weeks that we're closed.
I mean, we,
agreed.
so even in that period of time, that short, but until we reach that threshold, everybody still is on,
Exactly. But then, so you don't get to start counting the clock. You
Right.
don't get to start counting those 10 days. You need to get to 11 before people can
Right.
receive benefits. Right, so at that point, it says close for 11, so we can get to, because if you close for 10, that's worst case, and they got paid for the previous 4, which they would have anyway, right?
Mhm.
And then they get furloughed for 10 days. And then they don't, that's no different really from an employee perspective than from initially closing for 2 weeks, right? Because they still get 10 days without pay.
Well, I mean, they get the pay, it's just they don't get it for 2 weeks.
Well, not until they get to day 11, because they're not getting furloughed up front, they're getting paid, so they can't count those as,
Right, so you
Days.
have to be out 11 days of no pay, and then they'd retro you back those 2 weeks, right? I mean, you don't just.
exactly, but that's what I'm saying, is so we're
Right,
out,
so it is,
so we're
yeah,
out
I
for a
see what
month, right? We're out for a month, and then we say, okay, that's it, we pull the plug, we get furloughed, and they end up being out for 2 more weeks. That's just like they'd only been out for 2 weeks right from the get-go, right? So anyway, just thinking through that scenario, that we're actually, our employees are no better off in that scenario, really. In fact, they might be worse. I don't know exactly what those benefits, those unemployment benefits look like.
About half their salary.
About half their salary. Okay, so that's what you're saying. So it's half their salary, and our cost cumulatively
It's
over
half
time ends up
that.
being about half. But paid over time, paid over a long time through unemployment insurance.
We would receive a bill.
We receive a bill for that. Okay.
We would receive that bill.
We do have reserve funds for it. The board
And there's a
budgets.
line in the budget, and it has been tapped. People have, you know, Salem, it does pay money into,
Right.
for the unemployment insurance.
Right.
So those are questions to think about and mull about. That's good. I have to stop and think about that. But that gives us until our next board meeting. And please, if there's any questions or concerns, share them with Dr. Glover before he creates the plan, or he can incorporate those as far as discussion is concerned. So, any other questions or concerns?
I feel like there's a lot of different scenarios we
There
can come
are.
up with, so we just, I guess, have to come up with a general plan and try to figure
Right.
out what the best scenario is.
And you know, think about where that break would be, so. But I think the more notice that we give people about what to expect, then
It's better.
100%. And that's been our,
they know what to anticipate.
right, and that's been
As
the board's
we
goal for
move
months,
forward.
is to try to not surprise people.
So, all right, any other? So one of the things I don't, I did share with you that I had asked about in our audit review, our external audit review, that the unassigned fund balance was $1,089,930. And it is $1,089,930. That is over and above the amount of money that we applied to reduce the tax levy and what we had as designated fund balance. So it's currently $1,600,000, but that includes the $564,000 that we did assign as fund balance into the budget. So that we have to take a look at that $1 million. One of the things that we did in June is we procedurally had a resolution that anything above that 4% would go into reserve accounts. So I went back to my fiduciary training and I found all the things that they gave to me about reserve funds. And I do think, you know, we do, are you sure we have the unemployment insurance, Dr. Glover? I know we have the workers' comp, but I think that we zeroed out the unemployment. I can't find that we have an indication for that. Then there's
I would have to go
insurance.
back and double check. At one point, I remember chatting with Karen that there was a belief that was overfunded.
Right.
So I don't know if this year's auditors had said we need to zero that out, which is a possibility.
I feel like I
There
remember
was
that
one of them that
conversation.
was, and I don't believe it was workman's comp. So I do think that we would need to re-establish that one. But also there's some liability ones and there's an insurance one for any pending litigation. So I do think that we need to have a plan that incorporates some of that money into our reserve accounts. I know there are limits. You know, there's certain percentages, there's certain thresholds that are numbers that you can fund it up to a certain point in a year. So we do need to take a look at that. I do think that we need to leave some for unexpected expenses as we come forward. But if we are talking about taking a look at possibly laying people off. We should make sure that we have fully funded to the limit that we can, the unemployment insurance reserve that we have. So I do think that we need to take a look at that. So I don't know how that got by us, but that's something that we definitely, can't leave without attending to. So, Dr. Weber, that's another issue. We need to take a look at breaking down how we want to fund those reserves. So I don't know if John Hales would have an opportunity to work with us on that one.
Yeah, I'll chat with him, say, I saw your interaction there. And we can talk about what reserves that may slide into it and set, and then the timing of that. When the board wants that, how fast the board wants that to happen.
I think it needs to happen sooner
yeah.
rather than later.
Okay.
So I do think that it's,
Because part of that plan would likely be part of our response back to the auditors, as the fund balance piece was a comment to there. So that's, I'll chat, he's in tomorrow, and so we'll chat.
yeah, because at first I thought maybe because what we had done was after the end of the year, when we applied to reduce the tax levy and whatnot, but that is not the case. There is that amount of money that needs to be, we need to make sure that is appropriately addressed. And that begs the question, at least for me, when I was looking at this, is we really need somebody that can keep
It's on all of this.
keep track of this. I mean, I don't think that the typical train of thought goes to somebody knocks on the door, the board member knocks on the door to find out what the fund balance is. I think that is backwards. I think that number should come to us. So I've been thinking a lot about this since, I talked to John and last week, and we were talking about the numbers. And it made me think, before we started this current budget, you were actually recommending to us that we increase the staffing in the business office. And now we're down to a plan where that one person plus what you were identifying as an additional need is now we're planning on trying to fill that position with somebody that is there half-time. And I think that's something that we really need to be sure that that's what we think is what we need there. I mean, I had reservations about going to a half-time person, but I thought, well, if this is what, if we are so constrained by our numbers, maybe this is what we need to do. But we do have the ability, and it's in the budget, to have a full-time person. So I do think it's something that we need to look at very, very carefully before we move from, a full-time position to a half-time position. So, especially two different, in the same calendar year, two different recommendations from you. First to increase it, and then to go from 1.5 down to 0.5. So that for me is a significant change in the way you want to staff the business office. So just maybe lay it out for us. And I know that there is some benefit for having it go through BOCES, but if we don't get the benefit of that time, I don't know if it's worth it. So I do want to say that I have critical concerns, because one of the things that I did do is I went back onto when I was looking for all this reserve stuff, on the New York State Ed Department, I found the certifications for state aid, and we're not indicated to have any payments yet made for our state aid, even though the numbers are there. I did go back and look at the Treasurer's report and looked at revenue. It looks like maybe the October payment came through, but significantly we didn't have the November payment, and other schools have in the area. So it's not that they were holding it from other school districts. And part of it is, if a date paid does not appear next to the net payment, the payment has been withheld because the district has not filed required forms, Forms A, FB, FT, ST3, and the independent audit. So I know the independent audit's still out there, but it's not supposed to ding us until after November 15th. But here we are, it's after November 15th. So I don't know why that was so late, but
The only thing I can think of on withhold is I just got an email from the state, was it just before Thanksgiving, about there was an error in one of our calendars. So I literally have, the corrections here that I put in before. When he walked in, this is what I was putting in there, and I'm working with our data person on for this update and correction. So that might be why the hold is on the November piece, because there was an error there. And I'm working with Lisa tomorrow to see how things put together. But in the overall, in the forms, and I look through the business pieces, everything else is in, clean, and certified except for the calendar information. So that's being worked on now. So if there's anything holding it up, I'm going to guess it's this. And
the audit, we still have to complete the audit.
yeah, I'll check with John on the audit. Because the audit numbers made it in.
Well, the ST3 did, but you have to complete the whole document. It has to be certified by the board and submitted. I just know that this is experience that I had with New York State during gap elimination.
Yep.
This was on the municipal side, it's not on the school side. They cut us a little bit, but what they did is they made sure that they found every reason not to pay us. If we didn't have a form in, if we didn't have something done correctly. So, you know, the idea that you've got to make sure that everything that they're looking for needs to be in a timely fashion, or they're going to say, ding, you know. So I'm concerned that we make sure that we get everything in so that those payments come in, because even, it doesn't matter how much unassigned fund balance we have, if we don't get those state aid numbers that they're saying that we're supposed to get, we're going to be cash crunched without it. And speaking of that, the digital equity survey, has that been done?
That's after this meeting.
Okay, because that's got to be in by 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Yep, I know.
So,
I
you know, it's one of those things. I think that this is the year that we cannot be late with this stuff. It just, we have to have it done, so.
Yeah, looking at the business stuff, because I literally had it up. Form A is certified and in. The calendar reports for the first half of it are in and clean. There's a secondary one that I'm working on here that at a rejection. So there was based on some numbers that I'm working with Lisa to fix up. Form FB is in, clean, and certified. Form FT is in, clean, and certified. ST3 forms are in, clean, and certified. They're there, you know, so that's why I'm saying it. To me, it's only this other piece. All those other forms are indicated in. But as you said, you know, if they're waiting on the one piece before they approve the whole package, they could be waiting on this. And I'm working with Lisa Marcellus, our data person, on that.
It's just, you know, they are making those payments. We don't want to get to a point where they start curtailing them, and our large sums of money are in those packets. We want to make sure that we receive everything that we can put in our coffers from them as we move forward. So, and, the clean, is that what I'm hearing? Unemployment document, that's just right down my notes. Okay. So as far as we need to have a plan for how to address the unassigned fund balance. We need the overall plan for staffing numbers for any closures. And the business manager, I do think that that's something these types of details are things that are details that are important, and just underscore the fact that we need to have somebody who is vigilant and making sure that all of the forms and things are done. So, moving to the half-time position makes me very nervous. So, what are other people's thoughts about it?
No, I agree.
Because that would mean that we would have to step out and hire our own person.
And I gotta let those who's in the other school district know that we're backing up, because that process, they're canvassing now.
That's why this conversation needs to be sooner rather than later. Especially as we come up into, a pretty critical time with the budget, and if something's gonna happen with the funding stream, it's gonna be after the new year.
I guess too, so the additional person that we talked about at the beginning of the year before the budget constraints, what was the vision for that person, I guess, too?
That-
What
the
were we
vision
planning on
for-
doing?
The vision for that part was really for support for Karen, and to the level of kind of the support thing. So, handling the ins and outs, I'm gonna call it clerical, I think that was the plan for it to be clerical, to handle those pieces of the business office, so Karen could focus more on the business manager things, and some of those other pieces could be handled by that additional person. Whether that came, and there was a little conversation in and out about what that might look like. There's some conversation of building project and those pieces into place. There's some conversations about just kind of other aspects going on in the business office to help in addition for support. A lot of it came out of the state reporting pieces that came through, because when the Affordable Care Act came out, that increased workload quite a bit, along with SED reports that we get 2 or 3 more every year. So you had the number of reports, and you had the Affordable Care Act, and then we were back to full strength, if you will, after the gap elimination adjustment with employees and the people back in, that the work volume had increased to the point where an additional part-time person would have been beneficial. But part of that conversation too was connected to transportation. And clerical support for the transportation piece, because that was the model that Greenwich used when we were talking about possibly sharing that position.
So that person would have been doing some of the.
So there would have been some work into there too, as part of the conversation. But when that backed out, it was still part of the conversation. And then when the concerns with the budget came through, then it just went, no, we can't afford to add anything at this point. I think concerns are recognized, absolutely. That's where the board wants to go with us in structure. I can say in past experience and working with a shared business person, I've had some success with it. That's just getting a consistent person there. We're going to have the advantage of having that person here for 19 out of 20 days in the month for the first 6 months. To learn our system, to learn our pieces, to help kind of get ready and get prepared for the split. And then that split, as you said, then it does shift to a part-time between the two pieces.
Which begs the question, that clerical piece is not going to go away. So if you were looking for clerical help for somebody who is here full-time, the clerical issues are not going to go away. You're actually going to probably magnify because they're only here half-time. So, I mean, are we going to be in a position where we're going to have to fund more help in the office? So, in the long run, I'm becoming more and more convinced that a full-time person is what we need. So, but that's a matter up for discussion. So, I know we talked about it. We had sort of agreed to go with the shared service with BOCES, but in light of the fact that we do have some of the unassigned fund balance plus what we've already made economies in this budget, that money exists to have a full-time person. It's just, I've been thinking about this money and going through all the different things and all the
So-
way of
so I
the
still
forms and
have-
everything, so it's very much in the front of my mind,
no, that's
how
good.
much is involved in this. And
So-
it's not the board's job to be doing this.
Right, because I'm a little bit confused.
Okay.
So, what was the entirety of the unencumbered unreserved fund?
Okay, let me just find the right piece of paper here, because I got notes from different, all right. So what we have right now identified in our current budget as unassigned fund balance is $1,654,832, okay? That, I do believe, includes the $564,902 that we actually identified
Add to the budget.
As unassigned fund
as
balance.
unassigned fund balance.
And then it includes the 467,951 to reduce.
No, it does not. That's different. That was a line item that is recurring in
Okay.
each one of the budgets and has already been accounted for. So according to Marvin and Company and according to the business office, in unassigned, in addition to the 564,000, we have $1,089,930 in unassigned fund balance. And in June, we had a resolution that amount would go back into our reserves.
Yeah, so I just was reading that. It was less clear to me what.
I guess I thought what you were saying was that the 467 to reduce the tax levy was still included in that, but it is not.
At first, I thought that it was, but actually, there's a discrepancy from the business office as to whether that was picked up in the audit or not, and there's a question out to the auditors where that number is accounted for. So I don't have the complete answer to that question, but right now, that number is, according to the business office, outside of those two numbers.
Okay.
That was in,
So the
You know.
grand total then, back at the end of the last fiscal year, was the 1.6. Right, so because and that 1.6 did not include the 467.
correct.
So really, it should include it, right? Because that was money that was there, that was fund balance,
Right.
right? So that puts that at about 2.
And some of that was because we had such an unusual year in the
Right.
way that, the money was spent. So without doing a full analysis as to exactly where all of that money came from, we still have a significant amount of unassigned fund balance, which is a finding in our audit, and we do have to plan for it. So I think we do have to move some of this money into the reserves, and I do think that, from my understanding, is that we do not have the unemployment reserve account active anymore, so that would need to be funded at a goodly amount of money. We also, we have some pending litigation, so I think it's something that we need to look at. I was looking at all the different reserves, thinking about how we could use them. If the money goes into the reserve, it can slide into that line item in the budget. There's no permissive referendums on the reserves, so,
Right.
we could use them in that line in the budget. So if we did have uninsurance employment, we wouldn't have to use unassigned fund balance, we could go right to the reserve to fill in the line. So I think we have to be strategic in where we put that money, because we can't just say, oh, we have retirement, we have to, put it someplace else, you know what I mean? We have to think about how we might need to use that money going forward.
Right.
And I do think we need to leave some for unexpected changes, so I do think there's a way to strategically use that money for us. But I also think that based on how we've spent money in the past, that there is money to support that full-time placement of
So-
a business official.
So, to this point, we have kept more than our 4%,
Yes.
right? And all our neighboring districts did as well. And best I can tell, did not assign it to, always just assign it to reserves, right?
No.
That's a recommendation of the comptroller. But is, right, I mean, one of our neighbors kept over 20%.
Well, that's true, but I think if we are strategic about where we put it, it's still, we are able to access it, and we still make sure that we check the boxes for dealing with that money appropriately. We can account for how we're going to use it and have a plan for how we're going to use it. And it can always go back onto the, and also, I do think that we need to keep some, because they're telling us it is going to be a multi-year recovery
Absolutely.
for, you know, getting ourselves back to a place where we are consistently getting, you know, our state aid without reductions. So I think, that, you know, we have to be very strategic with what we do with it.
Well, that could be a question, right? I mean, if we continue to get our state aid payments and we make cuts, we're gonna end up in that same
We're still
situation
gonna
next
have-
summer,
Right,
right? Where we're gonna wanna be strategic with that as well to not have long-term
right.
impacts, or to maybe long-term impacts as much as possible.
But we need somebody to help us do that.
Agreed.
Right.
Because I know it's backwards. I shouldn't have been the one going to get
No.
those numbers. Those numbers should have
Come to us.
come to us.
Well, thank you for getting.
No, I mean, it's just, I kept,
Yeah.
my husband tells me I'm a restless sleeper these days. But I mean, this is something that we can't not address, so. Because that, it is part of our plan, you know.
Right, well, it's a part of our fiduciary responsibility.
Yes, it is. So. Which I think helps us to support the programs and the staff that we currently have here too.
Right, absolutely.
Because based on this, I can't see that we have any reason to cut any programs or anything, you know, to save money at this point.
Agreed.
So that's another plan. So, but I do think either working with Marvin and Company, working with the business office, putting our heads together as to how we do it. And I know my paper would come in handy one of these days. It's one of the things, this was from Gervin and Filazzo when I did some of the training. So it does explain, you know, how to use them, how to fund them, and you know, what the ideal numbers are. So I don't know if anybody wants to take a little closer with this, or if that's something we just want to
I'll
let the
pull that
business
stuff out
office.
and look through it.
Okay. So, I can share the numbers that I have.
I was trying to, I wrote some of them down.
No, I don't mind sharing my paper, so. So at this point, we've taken a look at our long-term, short-term plan, so we will have a more complete plan at our next budget meeting, next regular meeting. And the same thing with the reserves, we have to come up with a plan for how we want to divide up the unassigned fund balance. And I do think that we need to leave a healthy chunk for unexpected costs, for testing or anything else that might come along as far as COVID is concerned. And it does, the unresolved issue is the business position, whether we continue on the path with shared services with Hartford or go it ourselves with our own position. So Dr. Glover, what's the framework for that? I know it's moving forward, but, well,
I
Okay.
believe, prior to Thanksgiving, they had to canvass out on the Washington County list, that usually is 10 days. After that, with the holiday in there, it's probably taking a little longer. I have a meeting tomorrow with the chief, so I was gonna reach out to Chris tomorrow and see how things were going there. So I could update you guys this week. So that is where it is at this point. But of course, our COSER can only exist as if we all agree to be in it. And the more immediate need is ours, which is why we kind of structured it this way. Hartford still has a person through the remainder of the year. So if there is a time to step out, now is the time to step out rather than later.
So what are your thoughts?
The move to the shared business manager position, in my thoughts, were kind of twofold. One was, where can we find savings in the district to keep it away from kids to there, and that's the spot where that can happen. Two is somewhat of a future hope of actually building a full central business office into there. So some of the services that we currently don't do because of our size, with a full central business office, we can do more of those things. Now, it's easier for right now, some of the separation is handled by me. So I'm the third look at the checking account. Well, in a central business office, you don't need that. In places where the auditors say, you really should have another degree of separation between, who signs your payroll, who does your payroll, who did there, and we separate that out, but there's recognition that because of our size, it can't be fully separated. So all those kind of internal controls that we would put into place in a business office, a central business office lets you do, and helps with some of those management pieces. So it would get us a little bit more service on the business side of things to support the district on the whole business, on the whole really financial business side of things. If that's a direction of which we wanted to head, again, you need a dancing partner to do so. If I can work either way. The first place I had a business manager was here. I've always had a shared person. I've always had a central business office. There is an opportunity cost, to it, whereas you lose a lot of flexibility and immediacy when you don't have your own person and present. There's ways to overcome that. You learn the system so you can print off your own report, or you do those types of things. But if the board says we want our own person, I am perfectly comfortable with that. It's there. It was just, we kind of have the standard set. Whenever we have an administrative spot that opens up, we look at it, where can we create it as a cost savings to the district, and this is just another part of that exploration. It is something that's doable. This is something where, to the point of, we were talking another clerical. Yeah, but is that something we would be able to share in kind of those beginnings of that central business office? Or can we still exact enough savings by sharing that we can bring another clerical in here, for still on that part-time 20 hours a week to help support Tina and Tina's work in here, that still could happen too, as a possibility. So I can work in either model. The concern, I don't know if it's a concern, it's just a recognition that we know on the business manager side of things that it's not going to be a money saver. We may have the funds available, and it's hard to say you don't when you're looking at that for an assigned fund balance. It's there, but it's not going to be a place where there's going to be any breakage between the previous person and the new person. At best, you're going to break even. You're likely going to pay more.
And in the long run with BOCES, we might pay the same amount as we're paying now, but we'll have half the service that we currently would have with, we had with the full-time person. So, there's an up and a down on all the sides. And I see the picture of going to, a more, that central office, but I don't know if in this particular, if the timing for that is the right time for that. I do think that we need to make sure our own house is in order financially as we move forward, so that, you know, we get what we need, we spend what we need, but we don't get lopsided with it, either too little or too much. So I do think we need somebody watching those numbers. That is me.
Well, the risk just seems so big, so much bigger than the potential savings, right?
Mhm.
Looking at it from this perspective, that
Yeah, if somebody's not watching those numbers and getting those forms in, then that could really, the downside of that's more than significant. The November payment's over $307,000. It's interesting, you just go to the New York State Ed website and there's under financial planning, I think it's capital something, you go over and there's a certification tab and you can see, you just type in Salem Central School or any school that
Any
you want to
school,
see.
right?
And it comes up with, you know, all of the certifications, so it's really interesting. Everything's laid out,
I'll have to check
you
it
know,
out.
but, so I went to other schools because I saw the amounts and I thought, well, maybe they're withholding them, but all the other area schools have payment dates. So, you know, we need to make sure that those things are intended. So we know three things on the agenda for our December meeting. Is there anybody else who has any questions or concerns? At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public, if there's anybody who has any questions or
We
concerns.
lost our public on that screen.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and so whenever I shared anything on this, it forced me to drop
Oh,
everyone up on the screen, and then it gives me the infinity screen after that, so. Note to self, if I have to share something, I need a third login. Nothing can happen to the base computer.
I don't know, Bob, I don't see anybody that's
I'm
unmuting.
not easily able to see lots of people.
I don't see all, I don't think I see all of the, tells me 27 participants and I don't
Yeah,
see.
we were at 33 and
Yeah, I don't think I see everybody.
I don't know, I did mute a bunch of call-in folks, I muted because they were not.
Oh, yeah, there was some feedback.
Yes. Rattling around.
But we aren't taking, this is not a meeting for any action, so this is just a workshop for discussion purposes. So if anybody has any questions or feedback, if they aren't able to indicate tonight, if they, our emails, contact information is listed on the website. If anybody wants to share something with us, please feel free to do so. Does anybody else have any other items for discussion or?
I don't know, just getting a text, some of them are on phone calls. Did you not unmute people?
I tried to, but actually I couldn't, I could send them
Can you guys
requests.
hear me?
Yeah?
Yes.
Is there somebody?
Hi, it's Stacy Rich. I am attending by phone. I just wanted to know if you guys would be willing or able to discuss extracurriculars in specific an off-season protocol for our athletes at your next meeting.
Yeah, that was something that we had talked about.
Yeah, we
in
had.
November
So-
meeting, and
So for the December meeting,
I was under the understanding at the time that there was ongoing discussion or budding discussion.
yes, so extracurricular protocols. So that would be like for, we mentioned the intramurals, is that,
Intramural,
Stacy,
actually,
is that
yes.
what you're talking about, is intramurals or?
Yeah, I'm really, interested in doing some work with other coaches and administration if they'd like to, discuss a possible protocol for our athletes to have off-season workouts, whatever, if we need to call it intramurals, whatever it needs to be. I feel it's, imperative that we offer something in preparation of, I'm optimistic that we'll have some sort of semblance of some seasons, maybe even late in the school year. But more so, I'm really concerned about the mental well-being of our kids. Obviously, the athletes are my first and foremost thought. And I feel like that physical outlet, some offering could really go a long way for them. So
Didn't I think Julie Adams said at the last meeting that they had some things that they were trying to work in for kids. So hopefully we'll talk about that more and hopefully we can come up with a plan.
So we can-
yeah, and that was my question: is your understanding that you're going to have a plan presented to you in December's meeting, or is it just going to be another discussion? I guess my concern is a time frame, and I would rather not. I'd love that there was going to be a plan brought to you in December rather than discuss it again and then a plan brought to you in January. So did you give a timeline on that?
Based on the last conversation, we've already given the green light to several extracurriculars to start. Following
Specifically
set guidelines.
off-season workouts for athletes is what I'm talking
Nothing
about.
athletically. We haven't done anything athletically yet.
No, but
Okay.
that's what Stacy's
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah,
is
we haven't
the
had
athletic.
any athletic conversation yet. And then, certainly can be something to do, but that's something I would redirect back to the.
Maybe I misunderstood the last meeting. I thought it was as a result of talking about winter sports that
Right.
that conversation came up, and I was
I thought so
of the
too.
understanding that there was active.
But we didn't authorize any extra, we didn't do intramurals, right? I mean.
No, because I think the
But
thought
is that
was
something that
just-
we would need to authorize or is that something that could just take place in the schools as long as there's protocols in place?
Right.
Right, isn't New York State saying that you can do
Yeah.
those
And
kind
that's-
of things? So I think it would just be a matter of putting a protocol in place so that these things can happen.
Yeah, and that's.
So it doesn't need to be a board-approved plan for it. I think we all were in agreement that as much that could be offered in the extracurricular activity area
Yes.
should be offered.
Right, I didn't go back and watch the video, but I guess my full understanding was that there were discussions happening. about
Yes,
this. So-
gym usage and
But you're
things,
saying
yes, I
that on
thought
sports, no
Yeah,
discussion.
Yeah, no, well, I haven't, let me clarify. Based on the last conversation, the non-athletic extracurriculars, we started some of those up. We've got folks up and started like mock trial, for example, because they're gonna do.
Right.
So we started those pieces up. There's been conversations about, the athletic sides of things. But they've just been basic conversations and basically in hold for what we wanna do based on what's happening.
So is it best to ask Stacy to work up through the chain of
Yeah.
command for that? Because I don't think we need to create the protocols, so is that,
Let's talk with Don and Julie on, what plans might be for those to look like and when they might look like and start and how we can do that safely with space and.
But Jackie did share with us a protocol from another school over email that was showing us what they were using for their gym usage and things, right, Jackie?
Yeah,
Jackie, which one was that?
Cambridge.
Okay, if I have that one.
Just so we could, so there's something to look at when you're planning.
I'll follow up with those folks and see where they are.
okay. So Stacy, Dr. Glover said he would follow up.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your attention on this, and I'm not one to ruffle feathers or put people in positions of looking at something that is not reasonable. But I am also a squeaky wheel, and I have to advocate for the athletes in our district. It's imperative that we work for something here. So thank you. I really look forward to hearing from somebody, and it may just be that they haven't reached out and gotten me in the loop of the conversation. We've got a great high school administrator, and I know she's a mover and a shaker on things. So I will have that conversation as well and see if there's something maybe I'm missing. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for bringing it up, because I was of the understanding after the last meeting that a lot of these conversations were happening. So if they're not, they should be.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Stacy.
you.
Is there anybody else? I feel funny just kind of talking
I'm
to,
talking to a room.
talking to a wall, but.
I don't know how Stacy unmuted herself.
This is Julie Myler. I just wanted to make a quick comment if I could. I just wanted to appreciate how transparent and clear you're laying out these plans if we have to go into remote. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the discussions. I appreciate the attention on all levels, just so that we can plan. And I do appreciate that. I appreciate your efforts in putting together the best plan that represents all jobs in the district, and just keeping it transparent and clear for us so we can see options and we can plan. And we love our school. We want the best for the school, and we know that we can find that through you guys. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Jane Daly posted in the chat that she can't unmute herself. So I don't know if you can do it, Bob.
I think I can. So all it's letting me do is send a request. Oh, there we go. She's unmuted.
Oh, she's unmuted?
I just unmuted.
Oh, it's like everyone's dream to mute me. I love it. I had fun. Well, thank you. I just wanted to say, I mean, as we talk about, furlough or unemployment, I just really want to make sure everybody has a clear understanding of the difference between the two and the ramifications of all that. So I appreciate that you're going to hopefully look into that all. But I just have to also stress of, if we go, 2 weeks remote, 100% remote, or 4 weeks remote, or whatever the thing, I just have to stress how valuable the support staff, non-instructional staff, is to the instructional staff. So I'd like you to, to keep that in mind and weigh that out of, your cost savings or whatever the situation is. It's a difficult thing to work 100% remote. We tried it in the spring. We tried it for a week. The past week that we tried it, there were definitely some difficulties. We had people trying to teach remote classes out of the same room, 2 people in the same room. And so there was a suggestion that perhaps we just follow people's schedules. Well, if we follow a schedule and we all rotate rooms, that means there is going to be a need for cleaners. There's going to be a need for all of this, but especially, with everybody, with the non-instructional staff, just to keep that in mind of, what outweighs the, whether you furlough someone or unemployed. But I hopefully clearly understand, because there is a clear difference between the two of them. And also, I was wondering with the staffing too, like the cafeteria staff. I mean, if we so much of it, you're right. It depends upon whether people are. It's mandated by a county or the state, or for us to close down. And if there's any federal or state mandates that come in as far as feeding. So remember, like last spring, there was we had to feed people and stuff like that. So I don't know how that plays in and how that will also increase the need, because it seems like 2 or 3 people in a cafeteria staff to feed 600 it seems like a lot. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there to just at least keep that in mind and trying to really better educate all of ourselves of the difference between the two of unemployment and furlough, and that, because we're not 2 separate wheels. Non-instructional, instructional, we need each other, and so just want to put that out there.
Thank you, Jane.
Anyone else?
Well, then we will be back here in a couple of weeks for our regular meeting. And we'll adjourn our work session, 7:39.
Thanks, everyone.
Gotta find the right piece of paper to write that down on.
Let's say that chat.
Yep. So Heidi, it sounds like good deer hunting was had.
Yes, I had a very excited child.